Hi everyone. So it's no secret that times are tough. Housing prices are through the roof, inflation is high, most of us barely have any savings. Nowadays, this seems to be the only thing that people of my generation is talking about, more specifically Gen Z and the millennials. With the staggering cost of living, many of us are anxious as to what the future holds, because adulthood and what is expected of us as we get older, such as moving out, having a stable job, buying a house, getting married, having and raising children, retiring, some of these things are pretty much impossible to do in this economy. In this video, I want to particularly focus on the topic of children. It's no surprise that with everything that is going on, less and less people are having children. Birth rate worldwide is at an all-time low, below replaceable level, especially among millennials. But despite all this, regardless of what you may see or hear in the media, there are still a lot of people that would like to have children. I myself am child-free. I personally don't want kids, but I know plenty of people, plenty of women that still do. Where I live in Australia, only 7 to 8% of men and women said that they definitely did not want children. Rather, the ideal number of children that people wanted was less than what they expected to have. In other words, people want kids. They want multiple kids even, but they simply can't afford to have any. Everything that I've said thus far should be common knowledge to people around my age. Most of you probably already agree with me, but there are still some people who think otherwise. So, today I want to respond to a TikTok made by the account Eclair Hayes, otherwise known as Emma. The TikTok in question came out in January of this year and it pretty much blew up ever since, with it currently sitting at over 2 million views. Emma's TikTok is a response to another creator's TikTok that went on to explain the cost of living, the cost of raising children in this economy, and why millennials are choosing not to have children. I'm not going to get too much into that other creator's TikTok because, like I said, most of you probably know this stuff already, and also it's not super relevant.
Millennial parents and millennials in general cannot afford to have children.
Hi, my name's Emma. I am one of 11, so I have 10 siblings. We live in Southern California, so one of the most expensive regions and one of the most expensive states. And I'm going to explain why I think this take is wrong, and honestly, this whole mindset that really permeates our society that makes people think they can't have kids when really they can.
Okay, so right off the bat, I'm already a little skeptical because California, like Emma said, is one of the most expensive states to live in, with it consistently being ranked as the second or the third most expensive state. The average cost of living in California is a bit over $50,000, so times that by 11 plus the two parents, you'd be spending over $500,000 every year just to meet everybody's basic necessities. This to me says that Emma is probably a lot more wealthy than she realizes, and the fact that she isn't even aware of it goes to show how sheltered and out of touch she is. And also, I've looked through her page, which was painful to do by the way, and I'll explain why a bit later on, and I found that the oldest out of her 11 siblings is 34 years old now. So her parents began having children over 30 years ago, which is completely different to people having children now. And Emma herself does not have children. She is 22, so she is just a year older than me. And from her TikToks, it seems like she still lives at home with her parents, so it's unlikely that she has the adequate life experience to speak on these issues. But you know what? Let's just not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's just hear what she has to say.
First, I just want to point out that the amount of children that you can have, and honestly, a lot of life decisions are like big life decisions are just based on priorities. So whether that's your career or how many children you have or where you live or what kind of car you want to have or how big your house is, all of those things are going to play a part into how many children you can have.
Oh boy, was I right. So according to Emma, people are not having children because they're not prioritizing having children. And because people choose what priorities they have, they're essentially choosing not to have children. You know, this just feels like another rendition of the whole avocado toast argument. If you want to buy a house, stop buying so much avocado toasts. Also, I want to give a heads up and say that this video is very rambly. It's about 6 minutes long, but honestly, it doesn't need to be, because for the majority of it, she just rambles and says the same thing over and over again, or essentially says the same thing but in a different way. It's like she's trying to meet the word count for an essay that she left till the last minute.
And I guess I'm mostly talking to people who live in middle class. I'm going to assume this woman that I'm responding to lives in the middle class. She seems like she has a nice house in the background and everything like that, so she's definitely not living in poverty. And just growing up in poverty and raising children like when you're under the poverty line and all that, that's a whole different situation, conversation that I'm not touching on.
But here's the thing though, Emma. The middle class that you're talking about doesn't really exist anymore. Compared to 30, 40 years ago, aka around the time when your parents started having children, the number of adults in the US middle class have decreased significantly, as this article from Forbes would say. 40 years ago, the term middle class referred to Americans who had successfully obtained a version of the American dream, a steady income from one or two earners, a home, and security for the future. It meant the ability to save and acquire assets. Now, it mostly means the ability to put your bills on autopay and service debt. The stability that once characterized the middle class, that made it such a coveted and aspirational echelon of American existence, has been hollowed out. Even if on paper you might be making six figures, which would put you in middle class, but because of inflation and how expensive everything is, you could still struggle to make ends meet. You could still not have enough savings and assets. More than half of Americans have barely $1,000 in savings, because in the United States at least, inflation over the last 30, 40 years has made everything more expensive, but the wages have remained the same.
In that video, she's claiming it costs $237,000 to raise a kid from infancy to 18 years old, and that it costs on average $100,000 to raise or to send a child to childcare. But first, I just want to point out, okay, two things. First of all, the $237,000 number, she says that's just for basic necessities, but I don't really know what that means.
Now, if she were to just end the video right then and there, I would have had no problem with it. It's perfectly fine to admit that you don't know something, that you have no idea what you're talking about, but unfortunately, she just keeps going for the next 4 minutes.
It's like, how is that broken down? And I think that number can vary very greatly, depending on your priorities, like where you're shopping for your kids, how often you're eating out, all that stuff. Well, all those little decisions, they add up. Like all those, all those financial, oh, you're saving $10 here, $20, like those add up.
I would love to know what kind of world Emma's living in, where saving up 10 or 20 bucks here and there can save up for something like a house, or at least a down payment for a house. In California, where she is from, the average person spends nearly $4,000 a year on food alone, and this isn't even counting for eating out. And your average person is likely not shopping at gourmet grocery stores like Whole Foods or Sprouts. But even if it were true, which it isn't, but let's say hypothetically for the sake of argument that it is, that the only way to make it in this economy, to be able to buy a house, have children, save for retirement, is to work yourself to the bone, live on ramen noodles, and share an apartment with 8 other roommates, well, that fucking sucks. I don't want to live like that. And you hear people say stuff like, oh, if you can't save up for a house, stop buying avocado toast, make coffee at home, and cancel your Netflix subscriptions. But what's the point of working 40 hours a week if you can't even splurge on yourself once in a while? Going out to eat every now and then, getting a coffee, treating yourself to a nice movie, these aren't even luxury items. These, in my opinion, are bare minimum that you should be able to afford if you're working full-time on top of your basic necessities. I mean, Emma herself said in one of her other TikToks that her and her family does a fast food night once a week. Treating yourself is important, especially if you're going to have children. Things like birthdays and Christmases should be fond memories that your kids should be able to look back on. And speaking of food, do you want to know what the most common item to be shoplifted is? Well, after alcohol, it's baby formula. Especially during the pandemic when there was a shortage of baby formula, some supermarkets literally had to lock it up behind a glass door because of how much it was being stolen. People are literally resorting to stealing because they can't afford to feed their children, and you still wonder why more people are not having children.
And then the on average $100,000 for childcare is interesting to me because, like I said, that's just a priority. So I'll take my family for example. My mom has always been a stay-at-home mom, and that's not a privilege.
Okay, I'm sorry for pausing so much, but I have to disagree. Being a stay-at-home mom is a privilege. Especially nowadays, you hear a lot in the manosphere, alpha male podcast how women today are too masculine and independent and don't want to stay at home and raise the children, when that simply isn't true. There are plenty of women that would love to stay home and be there for their children, but it's simply not possible for some people. In the United States especially, there is no paid maternity leave. You can take up to 12 weeks off, but because it's unpaid, most people can't afford it and get back to work after 1 or 2 weeks of giving birth. But even if you decided, say with your partner, you arrange that one of you will work and the other will stay at home with the kids, but what if something happens? What if your partner suddenly dies? What if you get divorced? What if you're being abused and need to flee home? Most abusers don't start off by being abusive. In fact, many don't even show their true colors until you're locked in, usually by marrying and or having kids with them, as you're more vulnerable and will be less likely to leave, especially if you're the stay-at-home parent. What if your partner falls ill or injured and can't work anymore? It will put you in an especially precarious situation if you had been staying at home with the kids, because now there will be a huge gap in your resume that would make it harder for you to find a job. Never mind the fact that in the United States, your health insurance is tied to your job. So if you stop working for whatever reason, not only would you lose your income, but you'd also lose your health insurance. All of this combined, it's no surprise that people can't look after their own children and are looking for childcare, which in California can cost thousands of dollars, especially for poor working class people. Like, I remember this image that went viral a month ago of a mother that brought her baby to work at her minimum wage fast food job, presumably because she can't find childcare. Emma. There are people that are giving up on their pets because of how expensive it is to live. Animal shelters are piling up with dogs and cats, not because they're unwanted, but because people can't afford them anymore. That's how dire the situation is. You can't even look after a dog in this economy. How are you supposed to look after a child?
That's something my dad and my mom decided, and my dad had to work harder and had to bust his butt so that he can make enough money for my mom to stay home and watch the babies, which is a full-time job in and of itself. Don't even get me started on how I think people just really discredit being a mom. That's another topic. I digress.
This might be the only thing that I agree with thus far. Yes, I also hated how the society discredits and dismisses how much work being a stay-at-home parent is.
But my dad wasn't just handed a salary all of a sudden where he could take care of 11 kids. No, when they started their family, he didn't have enough money to have 11 children.
I would love to know what Emma's parents do for a living, or rather what her dad does, because she said her mom is a stay-at-home mom. Because like I said at the start, raising a family of 11 kids in California in this economy means you'd be spending at least $500,000 a year just on basic necessities.
But living in America, I'm sorry, you're privileged, if you want to call it privilege for living in America. You're lucky to live here. If you work hard and you're willing to put in the work and, based on what you learned in college or what you decided to major in and all that stuff, you can grow your salary.
No, I'm sorry, but as an outsider looking in, living in America does not look fun, especially right now. A lot of the things that I've talked about so far doesn't apply to me because I don't live in America, but there is so much that I could get into. But for the sake of sticking to the topic at hand, let's talk about the American healthcare system. The healthcare system in America has to be one of the most cruel, evil things to ever exist, coming from somebody that is privileged enough to be living in a country with universal healthcare. The fact that you could do everything right, do well in school, then go to college, then get a good job, save up, bust your butt at work as Emma suggests you do, but still be one accident, one broken leg, one fracture away from losing it all, and going into debt is frankly unacceptable. And speaking of children, can we talk about how expensive it is to have a baby in America? If you have complications, even with insurance, it can still put a dent in your savings. Like, I remember seeing this medical bill that once charged you for having skin-to-skin contact with the baby. So after having your baby, if you want to hold it, they charge you for that even.
So I had a baby 2 months ago and I just got the hospital bill. Let's see how much it costs. I have the breakdown on my computer. So I vaginally delivered him and I was induced. And yes, I got the epidural. Whew, amazing. Oh my gosh. The first thing is the labor room / delivery room. $13,900. Ouch. I got another bill that says room and board semi-private. That was $19,111. Next charge is anesthesia, $2,181. Pharmacy, $1,291.33. Other diagnostic services, that was $1,001. What is that? Please explain. The laboratory was $862, and then I got a charge for the emergency room, which was $411. So all those together, $38,757.33. That hurt more than the contractions. Thank God for insurance. They covered a lot of it. My amount due is only $1,418.26. Whew! I'm not done. I have like 3 more charges. Next bill is from US Anesthesia and they charged me $13.56.68. But after insurance, that was only $135.67. My last 2 charges is vaginal delivery postpartum care and that was $6,793. Ooh! The last final charge was the cervical dilator, which is the balloon that they put up there to induce my labor. That was $385. But after insurance, $651.16. We love insurance. Okay, want to know the final total? In total, it cost me $47,292.01 to have a baby. But after insurance, I only had to pay $2,205.09. Wow, thank you.
Honestly, it creeps me out how much America enforces patriotism, how much it is shoved down your throat with all the flags and the Pledge of Allegiance and the obsession with the troops. Meanwhile, you can't even have a baby in America without spending thousands of dollars. Speaking of college though, on one of her older TikToks, Emma basically said that she doesn't believe in college, she thinks that it's a scam and it's not necessary.
Okay, this might be a hot take, but I think that college is the biggest scam ever. Like, I think it's way too much money, and I also think it's honestly unnecessary. Like, unless you're gonna be a STEM major of some sort, like a lawyer, like, otherwise most majors I think it's unnecessary. But yeah, all of my older siblings have a bachelor's degree, but then out of the 7 older siblings, 6 of them went to community college for at least 2 years before transferring to a university. I just went to community college and I got my associate's degree and my certificate in paralegal studies. Now I have an internship. I just finished in December. I have an internship with the potential of being employed at the end of the internship. So far so good for me. I didn't find it necessary. I think it's a waste of money, but yeah, especially in California, you get 2 years of community college free. So if you're not taking advantage of that, what are you doing? But then even outside of that, like, definitely do your general eds at community college.
Which, you know what, that's fine. If you think college is not for you and would rather go to community college, that's your choice. Now, like I said, I'm not American, so I don't know much about this stuff, so I'll have some articles linked in my sources. But from what I understand, universities are for your 4-year bachelor's degrees and community colleges are for 2-year degrees. These are your certificates, diplomas, and associate degrees. It is similar to what we call TAFE or vocational studies here in Australia, which again, nothing wrong with that if you want to go that route. But if you are going to go on that route, you're going to have to keep in mind that you're probably not going to make as much money in the long run compared to someone with a bachelor's degree, and you're going to have far less job opportunities. Many employers prefer candidates with bachelor's degrees regardless of whether it is needed for the job or not. Emma, for example, is a paralegal, like she said, and paralegals in California make on average $65K a year, which really is not a lot of money. The problem with this whole higher education discourse is that people just keep on spinning the narrative in order to blame you for your own misfortune. If you're struggling to live with a minimum wage job, they say, well, you should go back to school and get a better job. If you say that you have a bachelor's degree but are now crippled with debt and can't find a job, they say, well, you should have just chosen better and done a STEM major. If you have done a STEM major but are still struggling, then they say that, well, you should have gone to trade school instead. If you have gone to trade school, well, maybe you should have just started a business. No matter what you do, you're going to get chewed up and spat out by the system, but when you complain, you get told, well, you should have just chosen better.
I just think that this is a lot more, there's a lot more that goes into it than just slapping a number on it and saying, you can't have kids.
Yeah, but this gives you a general idea on how much you'd be spending, right? I think everyone agrees that these numbers are not set in stone. They can vary depending on where you live, where you shop, all that kind of stuff that I'm sure Emma knows about. But this is where statistics come in. When somebody says that on average it costs this much to do this in this area, the keyword here is average, because by taking the average, you're accounting for all these little differences. You can also look at the median for things like income that would account for outliers where you could have people making millions of dollars a year, which is not reflective of the general population. These are basic statistical measures that you should know about, but since Emma went through the American education system, I wouldn't hold it against her if she didn't know.
I just want to point out that this video is just not honest, because she's taking into account things like childcare, but you only need childcare if you're prioritizing your career, and then that's just a priority, and that's not really it's not the responsibility of society or the government or whatever, the powers that be, to ensure that you can have a double income earning household and also send your kids to affordable childcare. Those are just your decisions.
Okay, there is a lot that can be said about this bit, but I want to focus a bit on Emma herself here. She goes on about how childcare is not really a priority, but I don't think she realizes that when you grow up in a family that is as large as hers with 11 children, the older children would inevitably have to step up and look after the younger children. Now, Emma is the 8th child out of the 11, so she's the 3rd youngest sibling, and I guarantee you, if you were to ask any of her older siblings, there were definitely times where they had to sacrifice themselves, their own childhood, just to look after the family. I mean, Emma said it herself in one of her older TikToks how her siblings had to cook and take her for dinner as they got older.
So as far as who cooked, growing up, my mom cooked during the week, and my dad would grill on the weekends, and we'd have a big family dinner/brunch on Sundays, and yeah, that was pretty much how it was organized. And then as we got older, the kids took over dinner, and now the kids just make dinner during the week, and then we have fast food night on Thursday, and then my dad cooks on the weekend because he likes it.
And I'm sorry, regardless of what you think, this is not right, because the older children deserve to have a childhood as well. It's not right that their childhood was essentially robbed from them and they were forced to grow up and be a substitute parent. Some might even call it abuse.
You're focused on your career. That's something you have to decide in your own relationship and in your own life. That's not something that the society should be setting it up so that both parents can work and there can be affordable health, childcare and all that stuff. It's you don't even have to be, one of you does not have to be working if you really didn't want to, because based on your priorities, you could downsize and all that, it's just all based on priorities.
I don't think Emma realizes that at this point, most of us don't really have any career ambitions or aspirations. Most of us are just working to make ends meet. We are prioritizing our career or our jobs because we have no other choice. You want to talk about priorities? Well, what about prioritizing food so we don't starve, rent so we don't end up homeless, or healthcare so we don't die, which in the United States, it is tied to your employment, so you get no choice but to prioritize that because this is where we're at. Also, what if you don't want to move around your priorities? What if you want to have a career and a family? It's not fair that we have to choose between the two when our parents and grandparents didn't have to make such decisions. And let's be honest, most men don't have to make such decisions. The burden of childbearing and raising children primarily falls onto women. And she goes on about how it's not the society or the government's responsibility to make sure you have it all. Well, then can they stop expecting so much from us? At this day and age, we are expected to have at least a bachelor's degree, work 40 hours a week or more, own a house, a car, have 2+ children, save up for retirement, all while the cost of living skyrockets but the wages remain pretty much the same. You can't pour out of an empty cup. Countries that offer greater social benefits like universal healthcare, basic income, free education end up having higher levels of productivity for less amount of work because those benefits allow its people to focus on their work more, which in return gives you more productivity. So even just from an economic standpoint, it is a worthy investment to make sure that your people are taken care of so that they continue to work effectively for you.
And I just want you to know that if my family can do it, you guys can do it. My family is not rich, okay? We're middle class, we're middle class.
Okay, if Emma with her parents that bought a house in the 80s in one of the most expensive states that you can live in with 11 siblings that you'd have to pay at least $500,000 a year just to get their basic needs met, if she is middle class, I don't even want to know what I am. And yeah, I agree that you can have kids under any situation. You can be homeless and still have 10 kids by 10 different people and have them all grow up on the streets. But just because you can doesn't mean that you should. I personally believe that if you choose to bring a child into this world, you have the responsibility to provide them the best life possible. So yeah, maybe you are right. It is about priorities.
If my family can do it, you can do it. We had even more than my parents had even more than the average, a big family is 5 kids. So it's if my family can have double that and we're not, absolutely struggling and we never were super struggling. So it's it just depends on where you decide to spend your money and how you decide to spend your money. And yeah, I don't know. That's just my thoughts.
So yeah, that was the video. Like I said, this absolutely blew up when it came out. Within days of this video coming out, people were stitching it, making response videos, creating parodies. It currently has over 20,000 comments. But there were still people hoping that Emma would look at all the reaction and try to grow from it by making an apology video or at least a response video acknowledging her tone deafness. Instead, she does this.
Blocked.
So yeah, it did not go over well. She has since turned off the comments on this as well as many of her older TikToks, but she eventually did post an actual response video.
Okay, I'm coming on here to clear some things up and to clarify some of what I said, because apparently my video struck a very sensitive chord with a certain demographic. I recognize that I could have been more clear and concise in my video. I was just feeling extra energetic that day and decided to voice my unrehearsed thoughts and post, not thinking it would get any more attention than any of my other videos.
You were energetic? That's your excuse? When I feel a bit energetic, I usually just go for a walk. I don't just pull out my phone and start complaining about millennials out of nowhere, but that might just be me.
Obviously, this video was not intended for or directed at single parents or people living in poverty, like I said in my video, or honestly anyone who's in a really desperate situation right now. That wasn't who I was hoping would see my video.
Again, like I said before, this sort of middle class with stability that Emma is attempting to cater to doesn't really exist anymore. Unless you're extremely rich, almost everybody is struggling right now. Middle class back in Emma's parents' generation, 30, 40 years ago, is not the same as middle class now. Middle class now just means that you're able to pay your bills and make ends meet. So even then, you're still living in precarity where you're one accident, one bad decision away from losing it all. She addresses the main critique that people had, which is, you don't have children yourself, you're a 22-year-old who still lives at home with her parents. What makes you qualified to speak on issues like this?
I know that the big contention was I don't have any kids, so why am I even talking about this? It's because I need to be thinking about this right now so that I can set myself up for the first years of marriage and prepare for potentially having kids in the future.
Okay, you know what? I can sort of understand that. I can get behind that. But if that were really the case, I think it would be much more beneficial for you to seek information from other places. Listen to different people that are the same age as you, people that are having and raising children now. Because from what it sounds like, you are getting all of your information from either your parents or your siblings.
I was also not trying to shame people who are struggling or to belittle how difficult it is to raise children in this economy. I recognize it's hard. I truly do sympathize with that, and I believe you guys when you're saying times are tough. I see that around me. I know that I don't have children myself, but I have my millennial siblings who are raising children, and I see that it's not just this easy breezy thing.
She then goes on to explain the main reason why she made that video.
The real reason I made that video is because I wanted to present an alternative viewpoint to the kind of like disheartening statement that millennials in general cannot afford to have children today. And I wanted to give hope to those of us that want to have kids, whether that be today or in the future, because like everybody was telling me, my parents didn't have the same economy that we did. And while I think there's a little bit more nuance to that statement, I also am hearing that millennials can't have children today, and then hearing that, well, it's only going to get more life is only going to get more expensive, and it freaks me out that so what people are saying is you're just never going to be able to afford kids. I was trying to use that video to remind myself and others who it's a dream of theirs to have kids, or just a goal of theirs to have kids, that the decision that I have some control over what my life looks like, and the decisions that I make today and right now when I'm not married and I'm not having kids, or even if you are married and you have kids, the decisions that you make affect your outcome in life and affect the future.
I can sort of understand where she is coming from. Like I said, I don't want children, but I definitely understand and sympathize with those that do, but is barely able to look after themselves in this economy. But in this case, this sort of bootstraps rhetoric where you're just telling people to work harder, stop eating out, and pull themselves up by the bootstraps, that doesn't work anymore. You can argue that it has never worked, but especially now, people are working harder than ever. Productivity has skyrocketed, but the wages have remained the same. I know it may be comforting for some people to think that they can still have some control over their future through working harder or whatever, but the truth is, no amount of control that we have over ourselves can come anywhere close to the amount of power and control that the system has, that the government, society has over our lives.
The only thing that I want to qualify that I said is that the only reason people would have childcare is because they're prioritizing their career. Obviously, that was an exaggerated use of the word only. I know there are lots of reasons why people would have childcare. I was mostly speaking in response to the woman that I responded to, because I'm pretty sure she has videos saying she could be a stay-at-home mom. She just chooses not to for her career's sake. I don't know. I just think that's kind of difficult to hear of I could stay at home, but I'm choosing not to, but I'm going to complain about how much childcare is, but she doesn't have to be paying for childcare. And then also proceeding to tell people that they can't afford children because childcare is too expensive. It's kind of contradictory in my eyes.
The original creator, whose TikTok started all of this, has finally responded to Emma, and I think I'll just play a bit of her response and let her speak for herself.
I know there are lots of reasons why people would have childcare. I was mostly speaking in response to the woman that I responded to, because I'm pretty sure she has videos saying she could be a stay-at-home mom. She just chooses not to for her career's sake.
Hi, I'm the working mom who prioritized my career over my kids, according to Emma, and she's been responding to my video in all of her videos. Here's the thing. She made a comment about me prioritizing my career and choosing not to be a stay-at-home mom, but that is not accurate. I've talked about why I'm not a stay-at-home mom. There's many reasons. One of them being, yes, I like my career and I like having a job. But the other reasons are, one, I'd like to be able to provide for my family in case my husband's ever unable to work for any reason and or is deceased, whatever it might be, divorced, who knows? I need to be able to provide for my children. I would also like to retire. That's something that's really important to me. I would like to be able to provide my children with a certain kind of life. I want them to be able to come to me should they need help financially when they're older. I know many of us didn't have that, and I'd like to be able to do that for my kids. I like being able to put my kids in soccer and basketball and gymnastics, and I wouldn't be able to do those things if I didn't have a job, right? There's so many things we wouldn't be able to do. For some families, having a job means healthcare, right? These things are really important to consider. It is not just about the career. And God, why don't we ask dads why they're prioritizing their careers over their kids? The priorities we're talking about is actually not whether or not a woman prioritizes her career over her family. It's about what our country's prioritizing over families and children.
Yeah, so I know that was a bit long, but I absolutely love this creator's content. I actually encourage you to go watch the full video if you're interested. I think she's so concise and articulate. Lastly, Emma ends her response with the same old spiel on, "This is just my opinion. Why is everyone so sensitive these days?"
Lastly, I do just want to say that the way that the people who disagreed with me engaged with that video, and the just pure vitriol in the comments and in my DMs and in the response videos, really says a lot more about the opposing viewpoint than it does about my take. The fact that I can't get on my own TikTok page and share my own opinion that's based on my own lived experience and the lived experiences of my millennial siblings who are having kids in this current economy, without all these hostile women coming into my DMs and finding my Instagram and pressuring me to take down the video, really is just so ridiculous to me, and shows how we as a society are about people who have differing opinions than ourselves.
Now, obviously, any hate, harassment, or threats that Emma received as a result of this video is uncalled for. Especially on platforms like TikTok, some people can definitely take it a bit too far. Like right now, if you were to look up her name, one of the recommended search results that comes up is Emma apology video crying, which firstly, that did not happen. Emma did not make an apology video, let alone one where she was crying, but the fact that so many people still searched for it to the point it is now one of the top searches goes to show that there are a lot of people that are just invested in her downfall to the point they want to see her in literal tears, which is just horrible. But that being said, Emma bringing this up in the video of her addressing her tone deafness is extremely manipulative, because now the topic of discussion has shifted from what she did wrong to ethics of online behavior, what is and isn't okay to do online, distracting you from the topic at hand. You know, two things can be true at once. The way some people went overboard with Emma's video is wrong, but also her bringing this up, victimizing herself in the video where she was supposed to address her naivety and tone deafness, is also wrong. And also, most of the comments in that original video or in many of her other TikToks that I saw before she turned them off weren't even overtly hateful. They were sarcastic for sure, but most comments, responses, stitches were patiently explaining to her why she was wrong. They were criticizing her, not hating on her or trying to cancel her. And the whole free speech route that she's trying to take with, "It's just my opinion, why can't people handle someone who has a different opinion to theirs," is such a lame excuse. You see this happen a lot, especially with a lot of the right-wing conservative influencers, politicians, where they would throw stones by saying the most unhinged stuff and then hide their hands by going, "It's just my opinion." When no, it's never just opinion. Opinions don't exist in a vacuum. We live in a world that has context, history, consequences. This sort of bootstrap rhetoric that is being pushed by billionaires, boomers, politicians, people in power, and now Emma is literally what holding society back from making meaningful changes that would drastically improve people's lives. It is holding us back from having higher wages, free education, universal healthcare, income, 4-day work week, and so much more. Furthermore, if you are going to go on that free speech route claiming that you're just exercising your right to freedom of speech, well, freedom of speech is not freedom of consequences. Just as you are allowed to have free speech to express your opinion, people are allowed to exercise their free speech by disagreeing with you and criticizing you.
Okay, anyway, I'm probably gonna do a little TikTok cleanse and touch some grass, say my prayers, pray the rosary, some adoration for some peace of mind, and just remind myself that social media and the internet, it's not a real place. You don't have to be so caught up in it, and that everyone in my comments is gonna be hating on somebody new in a week from now, because that's just how the internet works. Oh, and I also will be deleting your comments and blocking you if you say creepy stuff or put my personal information on the internet, because that's my prerogative, and it's not okay. Okay, anyway, peace and love. Toodles.
So yeah, she just doubled down and did not learn anything. I mean, are we really surprised? Now, going into this video, I already knew that Emma was religious. I mean, of course she is. She has 11 siblings. She is Catholic, which made it really painful for me to go through her older videos because she has so many videos of her talking about Catholicism. But there were also some things that I thought were pretty telling, like this one TikTok she did a while ago where she said that she pretty much has no friends other than her siblings.
Okay, this is an interesting question and probably an interesting answer for some people, but no, I don't really feel the need for friends outside of my family. Like, my siblings are my best friends and we tell each other everything, we joke with each other, I love hanging out with them. Like, they're my favorite people. So no, I don't feel a need, but I do hang out with people outside of my family, and I do have like a couple friends, but like my besties who are going to be with me for the resties are my siblings.
Now, this is just sad. But it also explains as to why she is so naive and sheltered. Even though she wasn't homeschooled, she went to a Catholic school. Like in one of the comments of her original video, people were explaining the housing crisis to her by saying, a home in my city, Vancouver, Canada, that could fit 11 kids would be at least $2 million to buy or $6,000 in rent, not remotely accessible to the middle class. To which Emma replies, yeah, if everyone has their own room and there's a pool or something. Not gonna lie, when I first saw this, I legit laughed out loud, and people were rightfully calling her out on it. I see you know nothing about Canadian real estate, Emma. Haha, I really don't. Then why did you make this video? You literally just admitted that you have no idea what you're talking about. I just wished people like Emma would just think for themselves for once instead of regurgitating the things that they heard from their boomer parents, but they don't because, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, there's a study that came out recently that showed that religious fundamentalism literally causes brain damage. This shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, if you've been raised in this sort of environment that deters questioning, deters critical thinking, values conformity, and is hostile towards anything different, this will stunt your brain development. I went into this video taking all of this into account, hoping to be as understanding and sympathetic as possible, but I feel like at 22 years old, you should know about some of the things that I talked about. I still hanged on to my last thread of hope, hoping that Emma would see all these comments, stitches, responses, and at least try to understand where they're coming from instead of brushing it all off as hate. But then she posted something that made me think otherwise.
Well, you know, can't bring me down. I'm on a high right now. I'm living my best life, and y'all can't take that from me.
Me when my perioral dermatitis won't go away and everyone in my comments is preying on my downfall, but the sun is shining, I have a family that loves me, and Brett Cooper just reacted to my video on her YouTube. Okay, bit of a side note, but I think it's so tasteless how she keeps bringing up her family, not just in this TikTok, but in a lot of her other TikToks as well. She really rubs it on your face how she has this big, loving family and all these siblings that are there for her. But like, you don't get to choose what kind of family you're born into. It's not your doing. It's not something that you have control over. Yeah, of course, if you're lucky enough to have a loving family, be grateful for that, but it's nothing to brag about. And Brett Cooper just reacted to my video on her YouTube. Brett Cooper. So Brett Cooper, for those that are fortunate enough to not know, is a conservative influencer with 4 million subscribers on YouTube. She is part of the whole Daily Wire crew with Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Jordan Peterson, those kind of people. Brett Cooper made a video featuring Emma's original TikTok that I haven't watched, and honestly I don't think I need to watch it. While there still is a slight chance that Emma might come to her senses, especially as she gets older and has children of her own, but what I think is more likely to happen is Emma springboarding off of this incident and starting a right-wing grifter career of her own. Especially now that she got shouted out by Brett Cooper and got some clout and following from that. And from what I've heard, her and Brett exchange messages in DMs, so now Emma has little connections and network in this so-called industry. So I would not be surprised if the next time she comes back, she will keep doubling down and would launch into being a full-out right-wing grifter influencer. As if we need any more of those. So that's pretty much it from me for today. Thanks for watching, especially if you made it till the end. Leave a like if you liked this video, subscribe if you haven't already. If you have been watching my channel for a while, you may have noticed that this is a little bit different to my usual videos. I usually don't make this sort of reaction response videos, but this one I really wanted to talk about. And video essays like my previous video take a long time to make. With all the research, filming, editing, it can be really stressful, and with the size that my channel is right now, it's not sustainable for me to keep making those kinds of huge elaborate videos. But video essays will be coming back, don't you worry. My life is also kind of hectic right now. There is all kinds of things going on. So for now, this is what you'll be getting. I hope you like it. If not, well, it is what it is.